Hey everyone, hope you're having a great week so far. Alongside Andy Gresh, I'm Haley Outen. Thanks for joining us on an all-new episode of the American Huddle. Andy, before we flip the page to week 7, what was your biggest takeaway from last weekend?
Well, I think the fact that UCF finally had the one moment, or at least a bunch of things that happened in a game to them, that they weren't able to overcome. Hard to turn the ball over 4 times and to be able to get a win against good teams, and that clearly is Cincinnati. So for me, it wasn't so much that Cincinnati won the game, it's the fact that they were able to force those turnovers and get UCF to make uncharacteristic mistakes. And it's crazy to think about, wow, UCF has 2 losses, it might be a bad year. Are you kidding me? Like, how many teams would sign up to have a 2-loss season and people look at it cross-eyed?
Well, as we look ahead to this Saturday, 5 matchups highlight this week's slate, mostly in conference action. Memphis is going to get it started at Temple at noon Eastern on ESPN2. And Andy, the story for the Tigers this season has really been freshman running back Kenneth Gainwell.
Yeah, 209 yards against Louisiana Monroe, 3 consecutive 100-yard games. And Memphis is one of 16 teams who are unbeaten in college football. Memphis, they're going to score a bunch of points. They're 3rd in the American at 39.8 per game. But you mentioned Gainwell. I mean, he has picked up right where other Memphis running backs have left off. That run game is now a big part of who Memphis has become. You know, it's interesting, Haley, you and I have sat here, and a couple years ago, it was Paxton Lynch and flinging the ball all over the lot, and then you get a coaching change. And now Mike Norvell has really done a good job of making sure the run game is a big part of what Memphis does, and they're just not relying on a quarterback.
For Gainwell, he's the first freshman in Memphis history to register 3 100-yard games consecutively, so pretty cool. Looking at Temple, though, no surprise. We're always talking about the Temple defense, and this year for the Owls, in their 4 wins at least, they've held their opponents to 17 points or less.
They have, but I think we need a little context here on the Temple side, right? So they gave up 6 points to Bucknell, okay? With all due respect to Bucknell, we're not patting Temple on the back in terms of that one necessarily. And you look at who they beat along the way, right? So they gave up 13 points to Maryland. Pretty good. They get the pat on the back for that. But then they go to Buffalo and give up 217 rushing yards and 31 points to a Buffalo team that you think they should beat. And then they beat Georgia Tech, where their old coach, Coach Collins, is down there, and they had run the, pitch option offense, and now you got Jeff Collins in there doing something completely different. So you're beating a team in massive transition, and ECU with Mike Houston, they're going through transition as well. So the numbers look good for Temple, but who have they really beaten along the way? And you throw that Buffalo blip in there, they've been a little bit up and down. So to me, they played Memphis, SMU, UCF. We're going to find out how good the Temple defense really is. And I know a lot of Owl fans have been screaming about, hey, give us more respect. They have 3 games to earn the respect of everyone in college football by going and beating 3 of the best teams in the American this year.
Well, Memphis will certainly be a big test for Temple. Again, you can catch that one at noon Eastern on ESPN2. Looking into the afternoon, Cincinnati at Houston. The Bearcats are coming off of their first win over a ranked opponent since 2012. After defeating number 18 UCF last week. Andy, you mentioned to me last week that you wanted to see running back Michael Warren get more involved, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, 133 yards against UCF, and to me, he's going to be able to run against this Houston defense, and I think we have to adjust the expectations for Houston. Not only is De'Aaron King gone and some other players have made some decisions there, but defensively, they're just not the same, and I guess it's a testament to having a big, dominant defensive tackle like Ed Oliver and someone who's a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, what they can mean to one team's defense. That said, Houston's very dangerous. They get a little downtime here to kind of figure things out. Mentioned they made a change of quarterback. But for Cincinnati, this is we think we're better than you. We're coming off a big win. Let's see how we handle prosperity type moment. And I think Cincinnati will rise to the challenge.
And looking at Houston, we mentioned quarterback Clayton Tune getting his first start against North Texas. How significant was that for Houston to get a win after coming off of a lot of news that week before with a couple of players redshirting?
Yeah, I think it was, the perfect storm per se in terms of, hey, we had all this going on. So you get a win against North Texas. Again, you get a chance to breathe now, and it's like, okay, now everything is settled in. Here's our new normal. Let's go try to figure this out. That said, they still give up some points to North Texas. I think they're going to give up points to Cincinnati. But, Haley, to your point, it seems like the situation has calmed down.
A little bit of a morale booster.
A little bit, yeah.
All right. You can catch Cincinnati and Houston 3:30 p.m. Eastern on ESPN2. UConn at Tulane. Andy, we've talked a lot about the Green Wave this season. They are 4-1 through the first 5 games, and that's their best start since 1998. They also ended Army's 15-game home winning streak on the road at West Point. How big of a statement was that for them?
Big. And I think Army is doing now what Navy did, say, 8-10 years ago, where all of a sudden they level jumped and they figured it out. Here are the kids that we can recruit. Here's an offense that's going to work for us against everybody. And you try to, at times, outscore people. Navy defensively has got some good metrics, but beating Army at Army is a big deal for Tulane. Now they welcome in UConn. And look, UConn's hurting. I mean, their numbers aren't good in the American. I think Tulane's going to be able to run the ball against them. Haley, the most impressive thing to me about Tulane, 500-plus yards in 4 of their 5 games in 2019, goes to show that what Willie Fritz is building down there is very real.
And for UConn, they have lost 13 consecutive American Athletic Conference games as they head on the road to Tulane. You can catch that one at 3:45 p.m. Eastern on ESPNU. Navy at Tulsa, the evening game on Saturday night. The Mids are coming off of a big win over Air Force as they look to capture that Commander-in-Chief's trophy this year. However, for Tulsa, Andy, they took a 30-9 lead into the fourth quarter, ultimately falling to SMU in 3 overtimes. So pretty heartbreaking end for Tulsa on the road. But how competitive do you expect this West Division matchup to be?
I expect it to be competitive because Tulsa's tested. And if you look who they played this year, Michigan State, Oklahoma State, Wyoming, who's a one-loss team because of Tulsa, and they played SMU, and you mentioned what happened in that result where they kind of had that fourth quarter meltdown. So for Tulsa, they played up so far this year. So I think that blends well and sets them up to play a Navy team who defensively has been better than I thought, 3rd in the American in terms of total yards for the Navy defense, but I think they'll be tested a little differently against this Tulsa group. I think Navy gets the win, but this is super close.
All right, final game on Saturday, out of conference. BYU heads to USF, and the Bulls, Andy, they moved to 2-3 last week with the win over UConn, put up 56 points against the Huskies. Was this the spark that USF needed as they prepare to host BYU?
You know, I hope so for USF's sake, and that was a big number they put up, quite honestly. I didn't think they would go to UConn and put up the kind of points that they did. We talked about Jordan McLeod last week in terms of the last 3 games. I think you just keep putting them out there. Blake Barnett will maybe get some reps and some turns as well. This BYU team, very much up and down. Like, they've got a top 25 win, but they're 2-3. They lost to Toledo. You know, I can't figure them out necessarily, but for USF, you're at home. You're coming off a good win. This is a chance for Charlie Strong's crew to build and find a way to get another victory, and those have been scarce for them this year.
BYU at USF, 3:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS Sports Network. Lastly, SMU, they have an open week, but I want to get your thoughts because it's been an exciting start for the Mustangs and what Sonny Dykes has been able to do so far in Dallas this year. They're one of 3 teams in the country to have already reached that 6-win mark. They're ranked in both national polls. Andy, is SMU the team to beat right now in the American?
I'm not ready to go there just yet because just like Cincinnati had to kind of beat UCF and be like, okay, now we're the team to beat in the East, I still think you got to beat Memphis in the West. And to me, that SMU-Memphis matchup, that'll be the one that we can have circled in red and really do a big breakdown on it, because I think that will ultimately decide the West Division in the American Athletic Conference. But let's give SMU a ton of credit, right? They've won on the road. They've won close games. They've pulled the rabbit out of the hat when they needed to, like down 30-9 against Tulsa. They've shown an amazing resiliency to sort of block out the noise and to ignore what goes wrong for 3 quarters. Let's face it, if they weren't mentally tough, they would have just packed it in against Tulsa, but instead they make the big run to come back to remain undefeated. And you mentioned getting to 6 wins. It's SMU and Ohio State are the only 2 bowl-eligible teams right now in college football, and we're 3 weeks out from Halloween? Pretty amazing that SMU is one of those teams on that list.
Mustangs with the week off, but you can tune into 5 games in American action on Saturday. Make sure to follow along on Twitter at American_FB or head over to Facebook for full game highlights. On behalf of Andy Gresham, Haley Allen, thanks for joining us on the American Huddle. We'll see you back here next week.